What if I told you the Texas A&M Aggies were an offensive juggernaut compared to USC?
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Culkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC. It's part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Whether you are watching this show on YouTube, or wherever you are going to download this podcast, this show is always free, and never forget how much I appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, maybe they're not really a juggernaut on offense. In fact, Texas A&M is the third best team in the state of Texas. Obviously, Texas Longhorns, SMU, the Mustangs, both those programs made the playoffs. Not the Aggies, although they look like they were in the running for the first 8 games of the year. So while they're not an offensive juggernaut, what I will say is this team is a lot like Notre Dame in the sense that they like to run the ball. And they throw it just enough to keep USC's defense honest, they have the potential to keep USC's defense on the field for long periods of time if that running game is working. Let's compare some numbers here, shall we? This is where Texas A&M ranks offensively nationally. So total offense, they put up almost 403 yards per game. That's good for number 54 overall. 203 yards, almost 204 yards per game through the air. 200 yards on the ground, 199. And they are scoring just over 30 points per game. Now, I would say the Trojans and the Aggies are pretty similar when it comes to points scored. Offensively, the numbers aren't going to be that different. USC is scoring just under 30 points per game. They're at 29.8. The Aggies, they're averaging 30.3. As far as total offense, USC puts up 440 yards per game, 291 yards through the air, which is 10th nationally. That 440 yards is good for number 22. USC's rushing offense, it's not bad. I know you look at their 81st nationally, but they're putting up almost 149 yards per game. And then I mentioned we'll call it 30 points per game, 29.8. This is where I'm comparing the two programs, USC and A&M. They have two common opponents this year. Both of them beat LSU. Both of them lost to Notre Dame at home. So the Aggies, the Irish, they opened their season in College Station. Notre Dame won that game 23-13. And then we know that they were able to come into LA the last game of the year and win that game against the Trojans. When A&M lost to Notre Dame, they ran for 150. They threw for 158 yards. Riley Leonard, he threw the ball 158 yards, and then Notre Dame ran it for 198 yards. They didn't have any turnovers in that game. The Aggies themselves, they weren't that bad. They threw it for 100 yards even, and then they ran it for 146 yards, but they threw 2 interceptions. That sound familiar, Trojan fans? Should. At that time, Connor Wegman was the starter for the Aggies. He eventually got replaced by Marcel Reed, who is their current starter. I think that happened in game 8. In fact, that happened in the LSU game. So that's another thing that these teams have in common. USC and A&M both replaced their starting quarterbacks. Although Marcel was playing during the regular season, whereas Jaden Mayaba had to wait until he was actually named the starter in game 10. Now, when USC and Notre Dame play, compared to the A&M game with the Irish, much more wide open, much more points were scored, right? Notre Dame won the game 49-35. Again, there were those 2 late interceptions that were the dagger in Essie's heart. Both returned for touchdowns, by the way. In that game, the Irish ran for 258 yards, and they threw it for 178 yards. USC, on the other hand, they threw the ball 49 times, got 360 yards through the air, and 200 yards on the ground. So they were able to beat up on Notre Dame's defense. So what does this all mean? Comparing common opponents. Not a whole lot, but I will say this. A&M, they weren't able to score an offensive point against Texas. That was their last game of the year. Why am I bringing that up? How good is USC's defense? Is it as good as Texas? No. But they have kept teams pretty much below their scoring average. If USC wants to stop the Aggies offense, they need to stop the run game, period. End of story. They have to make Marcel Reed throw the ball. And I don't think A&M is really a team that wants to throw the ball a lot. Their head coach, Mike Elko, in his first year, he's more of a smash mouth, physical, both sides of the ball, but they like to run the ball. And USC's run defense, it's been okay this year. And I gave you the offensive numbers just a minute ago. Let's compare defensive numbers now. A&M defensive ranks. Total defense, they're giving up 364 yards per game. That's good for number 64 in the country. Passing defense, they give up 227 yards per game. Rushing defense, 138. And scoring defense, 21 points per game. Compare that to USC. You're going to notice these numbers are very similar. As far as passing defense, USC gives up 371 yards through the air. Total defense, they give up 371 yards. Passing defense, they give up only 231 yards, so they're right there with Texas A&M. Rushing defense, only 140 yards per game, 3 yards more than the Aggies. And scoring, USC defense allows 23.5 points per game. I gave you Texas A&M 21. So again, very similar. Texas A&M this year, they were 7-1 at one time. Okay, they were in contention for the playoffs. Then November rolled around. They went 1-3. Their one win came against New Mexico State. They dropped a couple of games that they probably should have won, especially that game against Auburn and was it quadruple overtime. Auburn's not a good team this year. They're just not. But they found a way to lose that game. And then obviously, Texas would have been favored. It was a close game. It was 17-7, but they didn't score an offensive point. Since Reed when he's in the game, his numbers this year, he's 121 completions out of 198 passing attempts, 1,572 yards, 12 touchdowns, 4 picks. And then he also ran for 500 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. That's where he's dangerous. If Reed gets loose and starts playing like Riley Leonard did against USC, it's going to be a really long night because Marcel Reed is a bigger, stronger version of Riley Leonard. USC's defense, they need to keep a spy on him. Eric Gentry, that's your dude. Make him your personal responsibility. I know you'll have other assignments, but wherever Marcel Reed goes with the ball, you shadow that guy. You make sure that he has to throw it if he's going to hold on to it and try and extend plays. And I think that'll work. USC was missing Gentry this year. Once he, once he redshirted for the rest of the year with the concussion syndrome, the symptoms, I shouldn't say syndrome. USC lost one of their better defensive playmakers. He's back for this game. I think he'll make a difference. And against a team with a player like Marcel Reed at quarterback, you need an athletic guy at linebacker, somebody in the box who can close the gap, close that space. And when you're comparing athlete to athlete, I like what Eric Gentry brings. Long strider, long arms, pretty good tackler. Now we'll see what he can do. All right, so I'm not quite ready yet to give my score prediction. The Aggies are still 3.5-point favorites. We got one more episode of Locked on USC this week. We got 2 more segments coming up on this show. I will give my final score prediction on tomorrow's episode, but we're still we got more to talk about as far as this game coming up. And that's to do with USC's quarterback play. And how is Lincoln Riley going to call, is he going to open up a playbook? I'll explain more about that in the next segment. First, this. Hey, the NFL playoffs, they're almost here, but it's still not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, if you become a new customer, you can finish the season really strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has a bunch of different ways for you to get the W. You can bet on who's going to win the game. That's simple enough, right? That's what people come to FanDuel.com for. But you can also decide, hey, which player is going to score a touchdown? You can place a bet like that. You can decide how many points will each team score. That's another prop bet that you can pick. And they got plenty of more ways you can also bet. Visit FanDuel.com. Join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Jaden Mayaba, is it overconfidence on his behalf, or is it a lack of confidence on Lincoln Riley's behalf as the play caller? Question. Hit me up. I'm going to lay out a scenario here. Hit me up in the comment section. You're enjoying the show. I keep getting the feedback. Thank you so much to all of my everydayers. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you guys. And to everybody who's becoming, hey, Mark, you're growing on me. Continue, subscribe, like, hit that bell notification. This show does not grow without you. Thank you so very, very much. To the topic at hand. Remember when Coach Riley said, there's not a whole lot of difference between Miller Moss and Jaden Mayaba between their games? Well, let me ask this question. Why do you think, and Jaden started 3 games. When you're watching the game, I went back and looked at some film, and it kind of felt like his playbook was limited compared to Miller's. Maybe it's just the way I was watching it. My trained eyes, maybe they weren't trained enough. USC threw the ball. I mentioned this in the previous segment. They threw the ball 49 times against Notre Dame. And when I go back and I watched that game, I noticed that the vast majority of those passing routes, play calls, they were out patterns, sideline patterns, little dump off passes. You had the occasional shot, deep shot downfield, but not a lot of stuff was going over the middle. Everything seemed to be partitioning the field half this way, half that way. And why am I bringing this up? Because of those interceptions that have killed USC this year. And so I'm wondering, because Mayaba knows he has the big arm, strong arm, everything is effortless with him when he throws the ball. Is his overconfidence of being able to throw the ball into tight windows one of his bugaboos? And is Coach Riley's lack of confidence, does he limit that opportunity by taking the middle of the field away? Those zone coverage reads. So far this year, in his 3 starts, Jaden has thrown 7 touchdowns, and he's also ran for 3 more touchdowns. But he's also thrown 3 interceptions in his 3 starts. All of those 3 pick sixes. That's been a bugaboo for USC this year. It's not just the interceptions, it's when they happen. There's never a good time, but when you're down 7, you can't throw a pick 6 when you're driving to tie the score. It's happened a couple times to both quarterbacks. So now Jaden's coming back. He's starting the team. He's starting for USC, and he's coming back to his old home. He was there, when USC beat LSU, but that was Miller Moss's game. Jaden is now starting in the old stadium where he used to start for UNLV. excuse me. Jaden's got a really big arm. I won't say he's willing to take risks. Yeah, I will. He's willing to take risks. No risk it, no biscuit. Like I said, he's got a big arm. He knows he can spin it. But I think maybe that's probably why Coach Riley was calling so many of those sideline passes, so many back shoulder routes. Even on that pick six, great play by the Notre Dame defender, the first one. But, those are supposed to be safety types of throws. Ones where you're making it easy for the quarterback. Put it where only your receiver can get it. So, I think it's Jaden's confidence with his throwing ability. I think that plays into Coach Riley's lack of confidence, calling those passing routes over the middle of the field. And you think about it. And I talked about this before throughout the season when it was when's the right time for Coach Riley to insert Maab into the game? Give him some packages. Use his strengths, his ability to use his legs. And that never happened. So there was a reason. And I think those last 3 games that Jaden started kind of validates it. Why he waited so long to make the switch at starter. I think it had everything to do with Coach Riley's that he wants his quarterbacks to be able to read the field, the whole field. Like I said, Coach Riley talked about that. There's not a big difference between his 2 quarterbacks and the way they approach the game, the way they play the game. So I think Jaden will actually have a better game. Obviously, he's got a lot more practice time as the number 1 quarterback. He's getting all those reps. He's not looking over his shoulder for Jake Jensen to unseat him. Jake will be with the team. He's the backup. And then once the game's over, he'll be taken off for Montana State. But something else that's going to help Jaden in this game, he's not going to have as many mouths to feed. Remember how I told you there was too many number 1 type of wide receivers on the roster? Well, now that wide receiver route tree, it's been pruned, so to speak. You don't have to worry about the routes that Deuce runs or Zachariah or Kyron Hudson. They're not going to be around for this game. I think this is going to be really beneficial. And not just for Jaden, but for the entire offense in general. Mackay, Jacoby, those guys know. They're going to be the dudes. They're going to be the primary focus, the number 1 targets. You got Jay Fair, you got DJ Jordan. Keep your eye out on Josiah Zamora. You have a feeling he's going to make his plays. And I believe Kyle Ford is also playing in this game. So that's your wide receiver field. I haven't forgotten about Jaden Richardson. But I think there was too many guys out there that the quarterbacks and Coach Riley with his play calling was trying to satisfy. Can't do it. I'm okay with less number 1 types of players in this room. And you'll understand where I'm going with this in the 3rd segment. So it's kind of down the same rabbit hole. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Coach Riley calls the plays in this game. And if he's expanded the playbook now with Jaden, since he's had more time to get more practice with the number 1s. I'll just say it. Less is more. Less is more. So less passing, more running game. Let's lean into Amarian Peterson and Brian Jackson. Less spreading the ball around everybody, making sure everybody's getting a taste. Look, if Jacoby's a hot hand and Texas A&M can't guard him, keep going to him until they can't. Same thing with Mackay. Whatever's working, keep going back to it. All right, we've got one more segment to go. Hey, you're going out, checking out. Who's going to Vegas? If you haven't got your tickets to the game yet, you still got time. You should check out Game Time. Got that app on your phone? You should get it. It's really easy. and I need you to kind of enjoy life. Okay. You can't always just be sitting around saying, I don't want to go do that. It's too expensive. With Game Time, nothing's too expensive. You can do anything you want. You want to go to the NBA, you want to check out the Lakers, the Clippers, the Trojans. Hey, basketball season's right around. Well, we're actually in basketball season. We're going to finish up the football season first. But you know what I like about Game Time? Two things. Number one, they're only going to show you the best seats at the best price. They filter out all the fluff. And if you want to make sure you're getting the best view for your buck, use their feature where you can check out the view from your seat. And then you get the guarantee. You know you're getting the best price. Because if you find a ticket in the same section and row for less anywhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, just create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON, and you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So I saw this question over on wearesc.com, and it caught my attention. Fascinating. Love this question. And I think it's actually from one of my everyday viewers, so I apologize. Well, I don't apologize. I'm giving you credit for this gold Trojan. And he posed it this way. Honest question. NFL teams operate with a 53-man roster. Why should a college team need 105 guys on the roster? Seems like it's a potential drain on the finances of both NIL as well as revenue sharing. And the question is, why not just trim it down to 60 or 70 top-end players? And you know what? It makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Why not? I mean, in the transfer portal world, why do you need to carry 85 scholarship players? You really don't. You don't play that many. I mean, I would say, 15 of those end up on the practice squad already? So now you're down to 70. So why not just start approaching this from the NFL, the way they build their rosters? I mean, that's the way college is going anyways. How the players are treating it. Buy 53 or 60 players. And then, you still recruit, you still get the guys out of high school, but you don't need 25 to 30, freshmen on your team. I would say 10 to 15 is a good number. Let everybody else do the development. And now every year we see how it's working with the transfer portal and NIL. Guys are basically on one-year contracts. They're just transferring every year, every other year. That's how I think rosters are going to be built going forward. I look at it this way. Now that NIL and you're going to have schools literally paying players to be employees, you're putting them on contract. Everything's going to be more equitable. So why do programs need 85 players on scholarship? Why do you need that many? Like I said, when you travel, when you go to away games, you're not taking your whole roster. I think the number is 70. That's how many you're allowed to travel. You're taking guys who are on scholarship. Maybe a couple of preferred walk-ons, depending on who's hurt. But I'm looking at even with injuries, take the guys from your practice squad, move them on up to the regular roster. My only concern, here's my concern, and you're already starting to see it, is if you're going to say, all right, well, if teams start to build rosters that way, where they're trimming it down, trimming their overall roster number down, you're going to have a lot more money to spread around. And you're going to have teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees, if we look at Major League Baseball. They're going to say, you know what? Screw it. I'll take a $100 million contract, $100 million roster, spread it around. You're going to have players wanting to come play for your team. That's an exaggeration. Obviously, $100 million is way, way over the line. But you get my point. I think that's the direction everything's going. I mean, USC's already paying one high school player $2 million per year. You can't afford to do that. That's not sustainable. What is sustainable? Paying somebody $1.5 million, $2 million for a year for 2 years, who's already played college for 2 years. We'll see what happens. But I just thought that was an interesting question. I thought I'd bring it to Locked on USC, talk about it here. Give me your thoughts on it. 85 scholarships, too many? I think so. If you're going to travel 70 guys, let's just make that the cap. And remember when the NCAA said, USC, we're docking you 30 scholarships over 3 years? Remember when they traveled to Notre Dame? I think they traveled 45 guys on scholarship. The inside joke, George Katrib was USC's deep threat. He was a walk-on wide receiver. So don't give me this, well, the NCAA is always looking out for the best interest of their players. BS. No, they're not. So if the NFL can do it with 53 players, I think college can survive with 70. And let's start using that money more judiciously. Spread it around. And if you want things to be more equal, that's one way of doing it. So, like I said, when it comes to rosters and strength of schedule, you're going to start seeing a lot more 10-2, 9-3 teams. The SEC is already complaining about it. Kirk Herbstreit's getting dragged through social media because he's trying to run the SEC narrative. All right, I'm kind of rambling right now. It's the end of the show. I'll be back with one more episode. I'll be coming at you live. Well, not live, but I will be in Las Vegas when I do the next episode. I'll give you my score prediction. I'll give you my Friday rant. So until then, everyone, you know what to do. And don't forget, when you're done making Locked on USC your first listen, first watch every day, get on over there to wearesc.com.